Good morning. Yep. My name is Don French. And 40 years ago, I did something that at the time was something I did. Convinced a large company, Radio Shack, to create a personal computer. And when I do say personal computer, I mean a personal computer. It is not a hobbyist computer. It was never designed to be a hobby computer. It was designed to be a personal computer. If you look at it and had it, most of you have, there really isn't a way for you to get inside and do anything. We've had a lot of experience at Radio Shack in customers fixing their own products, and we didn't want it in this one. And so that's what it was finally designed as. I want to give you a little bit of myself first. As mentioned, I started in technology when I was actually 15 years old. I had and still have a FCC commercial 3 license. I was a disc jockey and a news announcer at a radio station in San Diego, KBBW. FM, of course, FM in 1965 was nothing. Nobody listened to that. It was the same as AM today. They switched. And I did that for a while. I got off school at 3 in the afternoon and took a bus, didn't have a car, took a bus down to this radio station and worked till 9 and took the bus back home. Did that for almost a year. And in November of 66, I was tired of it, and I was actually had an offer to go to an AM station, which was, I was looking at a broadcast career at the time, and I accepted it, and then there was a delay, and I went and looked for a job temporarily. It was Christmas time, so I figured I'd go to a Radio Shack and see what I could do. I went there, and I was turned down because I was too young. Well, I aged fast. I went back the next week, and they had a new manager, and he said, absolutely, we'll hire you. So, I aged real fast. I could look at too, right? And so I started in November 1966, Thanksgiving, day after Thanksgiving, in fact, at Radio Shack, when they had 39 stores. I jokingly say that today they have 39. I should go back. I mean, it's bad there. I worked my way through high school, into college, at Radio Shack, running stores. I became the youngest store manager ever at 18. I ran a store in San Diego, and I decided I wanted to go up to Fullerton State College for my degree. And I went up there, worked at Radio Shack at a store there, and then managed one while going to college. Radio Shack has a policy, and this is my first real experience with computers. They had a policy that on their commissions, that your commission was based upon some fudge factor times your pay. And you gotta remember, back in these great high pay days, it was $1.35 an hour was the pay. And some of us were getting $1.65. I wanted $2. And I went to my regional manager, and he said, oh, you're going to lose money to do that because you sell well, and your quota is going to go high, and your commissions are going to go low, and they'll end up making less. So I was taking computer class at Fullerton, and I went in and wrote a program for it. And I really enjoyed doing it, and I showed him on a printout that I would make more money. And so I wanted to pay, and I got it. But I stayed at Fullerton. I did do some junior college in San Diego, and that's important because a certain person was there we'll talk about. And when I was going to graduate, I took a trip to Fort Worth to see the product marketing department. Bernie Appel and John Shirley, names familiar for some of you probably, and talk to them about coming there to work. I was told, yeah, you have good credentials, you have some experience, stay in the store for at least 5 more years, try to become a district manager, and then we'd love to have you here in Fort Worth. August 72. And so I was, again, too young. Well, I did take the store up in Albany, Oregon, and in July of '73, there was an annual meeting in San Francisco. I went to it. I went there and had my 5-year pin on my lapel, and I saw the same VP, Bernie Appel, and he talked to me. He said, "Oh, 5 years." I said, "No, 7." And he started talking, "What do you know about electronics?" I said, "Well, I have a ham license, and I build things." And he said, "We're looking for a product manager or buyer," name used also, "for parts and pieces." So I said, "Well, I'll be glad to talk to you about it." I did not remind him that I talked to him less than a year ago. And so I said, he asked me to come back to Fort Worth. Well, I did, and I interviewed. And again, I aged fast. In less than a year, I did what he wanted me to do in 5 years, and I became their parts and pieces manager for what was called the 27 series. In doing that 27 series, Radio Shack, got to understand, sells 2,400 items. That's their whole SKUs, stock keeping units, total number. 27 series, there's 7 buyers. 6 of them had covered the 1,200, the stereos, the CBs, the TV antennas, all that stuff. The other 1,200 were mine. They were the parts and pieces, the resistors, the capacitors, the transistors, the ICs, anything that you could use to build something with. And it's a hard sell product line there. And so I came up with a product called Project Board. We made the PC board, and well, amazingly, every part needed to build the project was carried by Radio Shack. It boosts sales drastically in my parts line. And I did that for a couple of years there, and then I saw an article in 1974 for a Mark 8 computer, and I said, "Oh my God, I want that." So I bought one, the boards from Jonathan, and built it up. I built it up with the case and everything, like the one that's out here. Mine wasn't pretty blue, mine was brown. But it was built up totally as in a real computing with the even plexiglass in front of the lights and everything. I couldn't do a lot with it because of the amount of memory on it, but I did learn some programming assembly on it and learned how to flip switches easily. And I called Jonathan's company and said, "That's how many he sold." He told me that, if I remember the number correctly, it was around 8,000 at the time. I kind of don't remember for sure how far in it was. And I thought, wow, that could be a project board. So I started working on one. And I was talking to people about it. I had nobody's approval. I really didn't need it for a project board. It turns out I did, because the cost of a chip for a CPU for it was too expensive for putting a product line, so I would have had to have approval. And I was talking to everybody. I mean, everybody in the industry, and especially in the manufacture of the chips, National Semiconductor, TI, Zilog, Intel, you name it, Motorola, you name it. I was talking to them, 1, to get free chips. 2, to understand what we can do and how we could use it to make a computer as a board initially, and have all the boards as one set. They could be packaged together and sold as a complete product. I talked to a lot of other people, though. One of them is actually going to present after me, Chuck Peddle. He was the Mostec sales rep. Spent a lot of time in my office, because since there was no product authorization, there was not a product in the company, was not accepted, I was free to talk to anybody about it I wanted to, and I did. I had great conversations with Chuck. I'm not claiming the pet was mine, but It's interesting that it came out, the first version of it came out exactly like the description I had, even down to the microwave keyboard, because you could get a microwave keyboard really cheap. And I was having to do things really cheap for Radio Shack. And spent a lot of time with National Semiconductor, with the SCAMP and the PACE computer. They had actually designed up a board for me. And I was leaning that way. Then Altair came out, of course, and I got one of those. I got built it up with a ASR 33. And I ended up getting a deck writer and a ADM3 monitor on it, terminal on it. I used that to help me control my 1,200 items. I wrote a program in the Microsoft Basic and that would take the numbers, do the calculations for me, and print out lists for me as I needed. And I did that for a couple of years, a year at least. And I was working on showing in-house to certain people the computer, but if I showed it to Bernie or anybody like that, I would be stopped. So I was very careful in who I presented what I was doing to in-house. The Radio Shack does what's called a one-of-a-kind. It takes on a columnar pad, write the stock number, wholesale price, retail price, add up each page. 1,200 items worth every quarter. And so I printed that out. I had it on my computer. I was keeping it up on clock. I took it in to Carrie Nemser, remember the name? How can I forget the name? And handed it to her. She said, "What's this?" I said, "My one-of-a-kind." She handed it back to me with a columnar pad and said, "Copy it." I did. The worst writing you've ever seen. So, should have been a doctor. They didn't want it. Computers, it was ridiculous. And part of my job as a product manager was to keep the corporate, to some extent, to keep informed what I'm working on, not the details as much, but ideas. And I wrote, the name John Shirley came up again. He was then the vice president of merchandising in Europe. I wrote him a telex. I don't know how many remember telex, old email. And I said, "John, the next biggest product for the company, I feel, is a personal computer." I got a very nice telex from him back. Said, "Don't waste my time. We can't sell computers." And he was partially right. We couldn't sell computers. People would buy them. He didn't know, but couldn't sell them. When he got transferred, hired by Microsoft, that telex was in the Star Telegram, Fort Worth. I made sure it was known that he can't sell computers. So it was more of a zing than anything to him. My goal was to have a complete computer like I was using to help me manage my products. But I was still working on Project Board because I knew that was the only way I was going to get anything in. And I talked to many other people about it. Then one day, on Saturday, we had to work 5.5 days because the stores were open 7 days, 6 or 7 days, so the corporate office people were required to work half-day Saturday. The buyers were all in Saturday, and someone mentions, "Tandy's here." And he was on the warpath. He came in so upset. Luckily, it wasn't at me. Didn't care about my line, but it was about speakers. Advent had come out with some brand new high-tech speakers. Very, very fancy, very powerful. His comment, "Why, no ladies in here?" Why the blank can't we be innovative? We can be innovative. And they were started talking a roundtable discussion about what we could be innovative about. I kept quiet. And One of the other buyers, though, or product managers, said, "Don's got a computer." And the look on Charles's face was, so? So that's really what it was. And however, it did get it out in the open. And so I started talking about it more to people about it, and got more involved with National because they were our watch and calculator supplier. Made trips out to California often for buying trips, to look for new things, to talk more about them technically. And John Roach was the manager of manufacturing. He came from IT. He was the VP over IT also, then became the VP of manufacturing. He was out there and talked to National. I had asked him to check on the scamp pricing, and he knew what I was doing, because I did confide in him. He wasn't for it. However, he was willing to at least discuss it with him. He went out there and talking to National. They got done with the important part, which was all the calculators and calculator chips and watch chips, the most important thing. And he asked about the scamp processor, because that was one we were looking at. And they brought a young man named Steve Leininger in to talk to him. And Steve talked to him about the chips and the hobby market and all of that stuff. And Radio Shack being a parts and pieces company, there was a little interest in there in the hobby market. So they asked Steve, where can we get more information? And I said, well, there's a bike shop down the street, and told him how to get there. After the meetings, they went there, and lo and behold, Steve was behind the counter, talking more about it. And it came down to that they invited him to Fort Worth to interview, but the problem is they didn't know how to interview him. They had no idea what to ask him. So he came in, he spent the weekend with me, and we hit it off. I mean, we became very good friends, and he was the right person for it. And he started and came in and worked. But the thing is, he was not working just on the computer. I was hoping that's who he was coming in for. He was brought in as a high-level engineer. Yes, the computer board idea concept was one of them, but it was other things also in engineering. I mentioned the project boards. One of them was a digital clock. The most expensive board we had, really. It cost like $50 to build the clock with parts and everything. We got one back. A customer built it. The instructions are very, very clear. It says solder everything to the back. He did. It weighed 10 pounds probably. It was soldered on the back, plugged it in, and blew the circuit. And that came back, and Steve was very worried, and I was at first, but then I recognized, said, wait a minute, this may kill the computer, because they're only doing it in there, but it may open it up to get us what we really want, and that is a complete unit. It did, exactly what happened to it. It did kill the project board version of it, because the cost evolved, and we had to refund that and all that to them. So it did help considerably in opening up a computer, a true personal computer. Again, it was a personal computer, not a hobby computer. There was nothing a user could do inside of it. They didn't want them in it. And so that was one of the absolute requirements in producing it. We had a very, very strict requirement, a $99 computer. That's what our goal was. Had to have, it didn't have to have the monitor for that. The computer part had to be at $99. We didn't make it, but we worked on it. So we built it up and built some wire wraps up. I brought my development system in. I had a very nice development system that I was using, and I brought it in, and Steve used it with PLM, I remember PLM, and assembly, and wrote software for it, and did design. I'm sure everybody understands, the physical electrical design of the TRC is Steve's. I was involved in helping figure out what we did, how we did it, and the product, and some of the software on it. My background is more software than hardware, even though I could do it, but he was better than me, so I didn't want to waste our time. And we met with Lou Kornfeld several times. Lou Kornfeld was the president of the company. He wasn't ice cold on it, but cold. So there's a little bit of warmness there about it. But he was going on with it. Okay, we were going to do something for it, do a computer. Went in there and showed him some of our engineering drawings, architectural drawings on it, and he said, "Where are they?" I said, "Where what?" He said, "Every computer has one thing." Anybody know what it is? Or they have several things? Flashing lights. Flashing lights. He wanted flashing lights. And we did some designs that way. We didn't get it. Luckily, we didn't have to put them in. But that was his thing. Every computer has flashing lights. You got to have flashing lights. And I said, well, we can put them there and make them random flashes. We're not going to tie them to the system. But we got over that. He accepted it, and we made some decisions. We wanted to monitor, and the problem was monitors were very expensive. So being an importer and importing electronic equipment, we asked our ANA trading company in Japan, telling them we want a low-cost black and white monitor. So that's why we have a Mercedes silver black and black monitor, RCA TV. We bought them gutted without the tuner, and that's exactly what we did. Add an interface into it, and we had our monitor. And we got it done to the point it's wire wrapped under a nice case and put it under a table. And put a good drape around it so nobody could see it. And on top of it was the RCA TV with the panel covered. It didn't have a logo on it then. It just had the holes covered. And a molded case, gray, silver, with a surplus keyboard in it. Remember the 27 series ratio with a lot of surplus equipment. And so I had bought some surplus keyboards to sell. So we just pulled one and used it. So we had it all put together, and we invited Charles and Lou in to see it. Well, they came in. Charles had a big cigar, smoke going all over the place. I hated meeting with him for that reason. And he came in and sat down, and so I sat on the computer, and we explained what it was, and he told it was an H&R Shack, a 1040 program that would do your simple calculations. So he immediately sat down and put 100,000 in, and it broke. Charles, take a pay cut. How do you like telling the chairman of the board to take a pay cut? He did. I said, 32,000 is all you can have right now. You pay us less than that, so why not? So he did, and he put it in, and it worked. It did what it was supposed to do. And so we met, and they're happy with that. That was work. I told them it needed a floating point, and we'll be fixing that. And I told them it needed decimals, capability and higher number, and we will be putting that in just as a early version of it. And it was Leiching Wings, Tiny Basic is what it was based on. We highly modified it, but that's what it was based on. And that was integers. We had to have floating point, though, if we were going to do anything for a non-hobbyist. Well, we met around the conference table, and they talked about it. Like, it shows innovation. It's something that is part of what we want. We want to show we're innovative. So how many can we sell? Steve and I both at the same time said, over 50,000. They just laughed. We can't sell 50,000 of these. And they really haven't sold 50,000 of many things, nothing at a high price level. They finally decided they were going to make a big 1,000. That's what the goal was, 1,000. Even though we had 3,500 stores, they were going to make 1,000. They never expected to sell. It was just a publicity stunt to show that Radio Shack can be innovative. That's all it was. In April of '77, there was still 1,000 production run, and hadn't started production at all. We were still in development, final development, mid-development of it actually, and I had to go to West Coast Computer Fair. I planned a buying trip around it, so I could go. And John Roach was out there with National Semiconductor again for chips, and for a watch and calculator. And I invited him to come to it. He was hesitant. I said, "You need to learn about computer, what it's about." Well, we got there, and I thought I killed the deal because there was a line, as there always is around the West Coast show, and we had to wait in line for a long time to get in. And we talked, and he got in, was impressed to some extent, I assume, because he got back to Fort Worth and told Charles, there's got to be something about this computer. Got to be something about it, because people are standing in line for an hour to get in to see him. So it's something we needed to really look at better. And then that's when they changed it and said, okay, we'll raise it to 3,500 we're going to make, one per store. When Lou Kornfeld told me, he said, we raised the number to 3,500 because when the product fails, not if it fails, when it fails. I mean, he didn't add the last part in, but that's what he was saying, that I don't expect this to sell. I'm pleasing Charles, but when the product fails, we'll use it for inventory control. They were going to use the cassette on it and mail it back every week to Fort Worth. We had all the supply of cassettes we needed in the store, so they just sell them back to Fort Worth, and with all their inventory counts for the week, which would have been an improvement of what they were doing. But it's yeah, the execs, Stel, other than Roach, definitely was sold. Now, Charles was playing into Roach, I think. Roach became one of the presidents, one of the more successful ones of the company. He was playing into it, letting him do what he wanted to do. The rest of them were not. Bernie Appel was my boss. He was the merchandising VP. And I was over in engineering working with Steve. And I got a phone call. It was from his admin. He said, Bernie has a message for you. And I said, okay. If you're working on a computer, you're fired. They didn't want it. They did not want it. And so, I'm not. I went back over to the office quickly, I'll say that. And there was nothing needed over there. He just didn't want me wasting, in his mind, time on the computer. We've finished off the design and the project, got all floating point in it, and then Steve and I looked at it and said, you know, this can be so much more. So we talked about how to expand it. Yeah, we were going to expand it, we did internally for RAM, that was an issue, but then with the ROM, what if we wanted to put disks on it? What if we wanted to do more to it? We couldn't really do it. We had a bus on it, which was the raw bus, as you know, taken out. Very, very noisy. No FCC requirements on it, so we didn't need any. And so that was our expansion. It was to do it that way. We didn't put a lot. We didn't put a lot of thought into it. All right, let's design this thing really clean and clear. It was a piece that we wanted to add that we felt we needed, and so we did that, and we were working on the code. I don't remember which part it was, but Steve was absolutely stuck. I mean, we'd talk on the phone because his office was up in the north part of Fort Worth in the stockyards, and mine was downtown in an old tire warehouse where the offices of Radio Shack were. And so we were talking on the phone, and he was absolutely stuck on a bug. He could not figure it out. And we were talking. He said, "Excuse me, I've got to go to the bathroom." I said, "Okay. Call me back when you're done." And he called me back a little later and says, "I figured it out." And I said, "How'd you figure it out? What was it?" He said, I did a core dump." And so that was been our joke all the time. For you got a problem, you go to the bathroom, do a core dump. So he got it fixed. It had to do with the floating point. I don't remember where it was, though. And so we got all that done. And he got done. He said, "Hey, we got 4 bytes left. What do you want to do with them?" I said, "I want an operating system." Of course, you couldn't. And he said, "What about our initials?" I said, "Go for it." And so I'm not sure he actually put them in. I didn't care, but he said that's what he wanted to put in, and I never looked. So it was decided that we were going to announce the computer. We were testing it, sort of testing it, yeah. Around the office, and we had a QA department that, of course, they've never tested a computer, and so they didn't know what they were going to do. We scheduled an announcement for August 3rd, 1977 at the Warwick Hotel in New York City, and no, it was never scheduled to be on the steps of the New York Exchange. As somebody says that there was a bomb scare and we had to move it to a hotel. No, it was scheduled for the Warwick. There was a bomb scare in New York that day, which limited the press coming to the presentation. We announced it, and the next weekend, it was on a Thursday. On Friday, I took our 2 computers, which was our total production run, to Boston for the Boston Computer Fair. Set up, and Saturday, I was so swamped. It was so deep to get to see it. National press were there, so it did get picked up to see this computer. I mean, yeah, the hobby computers were out there all along, the kit ones, but they had no way to make the press that Radio Shack did. Radio Shack was a known national entity, legitimate retailer doing a personal computer. That day, August 3rd, and that day of that show was when the personal computer was born. That is what did it. It was Radio Shack's visibility, marketing money behind it that saved Apple. Apple would not be here. They did not have the money to do it. I use an Apple today. Everything I use Apple. I like it. All the other companies would not have. I'm not saying we wouldn't have personal computers today. It would have been delayed until somebody else did it, who had the money to do it, because it did take money to build it. Microsoft, who knows me with them? They wrote initially on the TRS-80. We did negotiate right after we announced it. Brought Bill Gates in, and I negotiated with him to create a basic, a basic, we call it level 2 basic. It was his, and to make it work directly on the computer in ROM. He and I negotiated it. It was actually got out of order here. This was back when we were still developing it, and before we had 3500 number. I was told to negotiate for 1,000. I didn't. I'd set it at 10,000 because I thought that was a more reasonable number. And John Roach's stance was, I don't know where they're going to sell, 1 or 1,000. And they wanted a flat fee deal only, would not pay royalties. And so I negotiated that with Bill. We came up with an agreement that made sense for both of us, a win-win deal. We also needed a manual. Need to have a high-quality book. Forrest Mims was an author of ours that we contract for many times. Didn't use him. I thought I'd look for somebody else. And I don't remember why we didn't use him. We may have been busy on other projects. My business writing teacher at Grossmont Junior College in San Diego, I liked him. He liked computers. I knew that. So I gave him a call. That was Dave Lien. He wrote the manual for it, and he started a major publishing company because of it. Made him a millionaire from doing it. And so, anyway, we get back to where it was. Sorry, I got out of order there. Anyway, I got back from the Boston show on Monday. I was supposed to go to Japan on Tuesday on a buying trip. Never made it. Phones weren't working. There were over 15,000 calls asking for more information or orders for that computer. Phones were, I mean, you couldn't get a call in or out. I took over the conference room as my new office. They hired me an admin immediately to handle it, and I moved from being product manager for parts and pieces to product manager for computing. And so we got it out, answered a lot of calls. Where's my computer? And so some of you were those that called. I'm sure of it. Because we didn't have it. We had just started production. Like, remember, it was not going to sell. We don't worry about it. And our production run, even though we had sold tens of thousands, our production run schedule was still based on 3,500 for months. And the poor management, the not believing that people would still would want it really, that these were not real orders. That's always a problem when you try something like that. Anyway, after it was announced, of course, we released the extension module, or chassis for it, that would allow us to tie more memory and disk drives and that. And there were some mistakes made in that, and I'll discuss them in a minute. That year, 78, around midsummer, I took the risk and went up and saw Charles Tandy. And I said, Charles, I've given you a very valuable product that you guys didn't want. It's actually saving Radio Shack. CB was 40% of the market. Computer went, it's like that. Volume of the company basically stayed equal. Then it grew from more computers. But no, I basically saved the company getting into this product. And he admitted it. He said, yeah, it's been a great thing for us. And I said that I'd like a bonus and I'd like a vice presidency. He said, yes. It'll be appointed a vice presidency over computer products, and you'll get, I won't say the amount, but it was a very large bonus. And so I said, thank you, and left. 30 days later, he died. I got a belt buckle instead. and I left. And in leaving, I met with Bill. I went and talked to him and about working for him, and we talked. He said, "One thing about you is you're so ruthless." Coming from Bill. And I think another one of my claims to fame is I taught Bill to be ruthless. Because he thought I was. I told him, says, "Bill, we negotiated this to a win-win. It was fine with you. Hindsight, we never knew we'd be up in 200-some thousand. Nobody thought that. And so it was win for what we did. I gave you more than I was supposed to, and you were happy with it. And that's a win-win. The results you can't predict." I don't think he's ever taken a fixed price contract again. I'm not sure about it. I wouldn't on that. And he did offer me a job. I would have been his 9th employee. Guess what? I'm not his 9th employee. I never joined him. So, not unhappy about it, though. I did other things. I started a little bit about what's finishing, then I want to go into some of the changes I would have made. I did start a new company called FMG, named after my dogs, initials of my dogs. I created CPM for it. I knew Gary Kildall very well. And plus one that nobody knows about, or most people don't know about, an S100 adapter for the TRS-80. You plug the expansion bus in the top of it, you could run S100 cards. Nobody knows about it. Didn't sell. I think I sold 10. But it was a manufactured thing. I didn't want to do manufacturing. I wanted to write software. And so I got into the lucrative business software for the TRS-80 and for all, and have some patents on things. What would I do different? I would do a couple things different. One, not so focused on the money, the cost. Yeah, we tried for a $99 computer, we ended up at $199. People ask, why is it lowercase or uppercase only? $1.99 is why. $1.99 at wholesale is $5 at retail. Had to be, that's why everything was done that way. I would have thought more about the expansion bus, made it more legitimate. It was almost an afterthought, just so we had something to get out so we can do something more onto it. I would have done that. The other big one I would have done, which would have changed the computing world if we had done it. I would not have covered the interrupts with the ROM. I would have left them open. That would have made CPM directly compatible with that machine. And if CPM was that directly compatible with it, MS-DOS would not exist, assuming Gary doesn't do another stupid event. It would not be. It would be the standard. Radio Shack owned the market up until they panicked when IBM came in. They owned it. They had the majority of the market. And with running CPM, it would have become the standard. So that's why that would have, I feel, totally changed the market by doing that. Those are the things that that I would have done different. Other than that, it's a solid machine. There's some little things inside, but very minor. And to correct some, one particular claim out there, Ray Holtz had nothing to do with the TRS-80. Charles Tandy had invited several people in because he was not sure of the product yet to talk to them about it. Ray may have brought a computer in, I don't know. I know the name. He never saw Steve or me. We were the only ones doing the computer. So we did not take it apart as he claimed. We never saw it. So he had absolutely nothing to do with it. And Radio Shack, the reason it failed with it is they had poor management. They didn't believe in it, still didn't believe in it. They didn't understand it. They brought people up, some people with minimal knowledge in computers. So they did good in sales in the store, and they brought them up to run the computer department. It's those types of things that were the death of computing at Radio Shack. And it's a shame to me. It really is. Okay, I have a few minutes left. I do want questions. I love questions. Wait a minute, I hard of hearing, so I got a mic here.
So Radio Shack pretty much went over the high side in 2015, and from your story, it sounds like they've had a problem with corporate vision for a long time before that. Can you comment on that?
Radio Shack had a problem with corporate vision forever. Remember, they started out as a parts and pieces store in Boston, electronic parts. They were a do-it-yourself store, a Home Depot for computing. They were failing in '63 when Charles bought them. Charles was in the kit business for leather kits. Okay? So he bought them and started expanding them. And in '66, he expanded. When I joined, it was 39 stores they had. They changed the focus from electronic pieces to stereos. CBs came out. Even part of my line was security. That was another big one. They were focusing on high dollar tickets. Because I don't know how you remember the battery card. It was one of Charles's things. You came in once a month, you got a battery. But the goal was, he didn't care about the battery. The guy was to get you in the darn store. And if you didn't hand everybody a battery card as a salesman, that was a zing against you. You'd get fired for it. Because they wanted that was always get them in the store and then for the salespeople to sell them. Cheap advertising. But they had, their whole thing was on stereo. That's what they were focused on. And switching them over to computer, they never switched. That's the big problem. They never, ever switched. Yes?
I've talked to you about this before. I was asking you about the difference between the 6502 and the Z80, about the choice, which processor you use. You did mention that you met about the 6502. I was just curious about, other than cost, I was always under the impression the 6502 was a less expensive processor, but yet it was cheaper to go with the Z80 over the 6502?
The 6502 was not cheaper when you built it up into a system. It required more peripheral chips and didn't handle memories cleanly. We used dynamic memory in that machine. Because one reason is the Z80 could handle it directly. And so we saved several chips in doing it as a reason. It was all about cost. I mean, the initial one we looked at was the scam, the Microsoft scam. It would have worked, except even though the chip was cheaper, the total cost was higher. We looked at the pace, but it was a 16-bit processor. We looked at it. The cost to do it was high, though. And the chip was high there too, but all the rest of the peripherals were. Any questions? They'll bring a mic to you. Don't get too close to that edge.
I never had one, Don, but I grew up with a TI. But the way that it was actually connected to the screen and stuff used DIN connectors. Is there some rationale behind, was it the cost of the DIN connectors was cheaper than using like phono connectors or something? Or
we had DIN connectors in our product line. I'm serious. If we could do it cheap, we did it cheap. It was all about a $99 computer. It was all about that. That's what's so interesting about it.
I don't know about the history, but in '77 there were 3 appliance computers that were released.
There were what?
3 appliance computers: the PET, the TRS-80, and the Apple II.
Apple II is not a appliance computer. It was a hobby computer.
Oh, okay. So
you just said it yesterday.
What makes an appliance computer and a home computer a home computer?
It was not. It was a hobby computer. He said it yesterday, and I agree with it. It was. The PET came out, and I say I'm not claiming it. However, a lot of the concept of what was in it, it was a concept of everything. You say even down say the microwave keyboard was what I explained to Chuck and what I was trying to do. He spent many hours in my office. One trying to sell me a 6502 chip and didn't use it. But he spent a lot of time in there. While this was not an accepted project, I could talk to anybody I wanted to about it. And I was, because I wanted to get a computer. I didn't care if somebody built one and sold it to us. I didn't care. I wanted to get a computer in the product line.
So Tandy came first before Apple and PET?
No, Apple One came out, or Apple II, excuse me, came out in mid-year. We were August 3rd. We were a little bit after them, and I don't remember when the PET came out.
Okay.
But none of them had the money. None of those had the money to create the market. It took, I don't know the exact number we spent, but it took a lot of money. A lot of advertising we did finally on it to sell what we did. We saw a lot of money. That computer replaced all of the CD market. That was 40% of our sales. So you can go back and look at 77, what our sales volume was, and 40%. Yes.
Hey, Don, did you ever make Lou Kornfeld eat crow over that comment about the computers only being used in the stores? Did he ever admit that he was wrong?
No. Kornfeld claimed that the whole thing was his idea in his book, Tandy Money Machine. He flat said, oh, it's his idea. And that's why it's so funny. I just started getting back involved 5-10 years ago. One, I'm getting to be an old fart, and I want this story told because Apple is constantly claiming it, that they created the personal computer market. They did not. First, if it hadn't been for Radio Shack, they would be bankrupt. They were on the verge. They had no money, heavily in debt, and without Radio Shack pulling it through, by causing demand, one, not having enough made. If we had enough made to meet the needs, I don't know if the Apple would have been that successful. But the awareness of a personal computer was generated by Radio Shack and the money. Any more?
I heard when you started manufacturing, you had like some sort of plant in Texas where people were literally soldering things together. Is that really how it happened, or did you get the boards fabricated and wave soldered and then people stuffed in chips? How actually did they?
Oh, we wave soldered.
How'd you get caught up with that much backlog? Did you get somebody else to do it for you, or did?
No, we increased the plant. We increased the plants. We had a full wave solder. In fact, when I built my Altair, it had all sockets on it. I just took it, and Dave Cherney was the plant manager there, and he was also the plant manager, which was my product line. I just took him down to him and gave him to him and said, Dave, can you wave solder this? Perfectly wave soldered. On an S100, did I solder 100 of them? No. I had a wave soldered. And we did too. The board was wave soldered. We made them. They were all manufactured in Fort Worth, though. We didn't go out. They were all manufactured by Radio Shack. Our factory. And yeah, I'm sure that we had people with soldering irons on the QA fixing things. I'm sure of that. But it was wave soldered. Any more?
One here. So do you follow the current modern retro projects tied to the Model 1, like the Free HD and some other projects, and what do you think of them?
I don't, and I should.
Do you still own a Model 1?
Oh, yes. I own a pre-production and a post-production.
So you actually left Radio Shack after the machine was released and never went back?
Yeah, I quit. I created the Tandy Computers for them, which became Radio Shack Computer Center. That was right after the release, and part of me being a product manager for computing. That whole store was a market research store. We had all of the vendors were suppliers to us, so we could see what others were doing, how well they were selling, and what customers were saying about the competition. We even had some we had a Data General, we had can't remember now, another mini computer in the store also, to see what the differences and understand when a person would need it, how big do we have to get in the business side. We knew we wanted to get in the business side. That was the computer side. The consumer side was big, but we knew the business side was big also, and we wanted to get in that.
Yeah, they sort of went in all different directions with the Model 2 and 3 and 4 and
No direction at all.
Yeah.
I left in 78, 1 year later. And they had no directions. I just got fed up with being screwed, badly as I was. And I do still have my belt buckle though. The only thing I got out of it. And I took advantage of the mistakes we made by doing CPM for it. Because we put disc on it before the disc came out. And so before the Radio Shack had it, I had CPM running. I went and spent a lot of time at Digital Research, Gary Kildall and Dorothy and what's her name? Forgot her name. They used to work with there all the time. Sue. Spent a lot of time there porting it. Spent a lot of time with Bill and Paul. For 3 years, I worked with them directly after leaving Radio Shack. I ported all of the Microsoft products over to the PRS-80 running on CPM. They had to change all the interrupts, manual changing the interrupts to get it to work.
While you were there, was there any discussion on the business end of the Tandy 10, the elusive Tandy 10 computer?
No, that was several years after I left. The problem with their product line is they didn't have thought. They had no direction from the executives. They didn't know. They hired John Roberts, the president, Roberts' last name for the head up computing. He didn't understand it either. He was a pure technician. He didn't understand the business side of it, and that was a problem. That's a problem with a lot of computer companies. They start off, Apple was good about it because they understood a lot more. They start off with a product not understanding its true need, how it's going to be used, how can we meet the need we're aiming for, and then how can we widen it. That was the problem. Radio Shack stayed there. And then IBM came in, and I don't know. I don't know how true it is. It makes sense. I've heard it several times that IBM did not enter the personal computer market to sell personal computers. Sounds odd, doesn't it? They were under attack from the Justice Department all the time because they owned every computer market they were in. They felt they could get in. The story goes, I feel they could get into this one, in the personal computing, because Radio Shack owned it. Never, and that's one reason they're out of it too. Lenovo has it now because it's Justice Department. And Radio Shack also had the belief, because we did it with the Model 1, that they didn't have to follow any standards. When they did the Microsoft version, 88, 8088, and 86, 8186, they didn't make it compatible. Stupid move. Absolutely stupid move. They would have made it compatible. I think they would have sold way more and instead of being a viable market, because not everybody wants IBM. It would have been a much more viable market, and some of the other competitors out there, which were small companies that now became big, wouldn't exist either. But they made a major mistake. And that's the president level accepting it and who they put in as heading up computers. No business knowledge.
Did Steve stay there for a while after you
Yes.
left? And did you keep in touch with him?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Did you
Talked to him
work
the other day.
together later on
talked
any
to him
other
the other day.
projects?
Yeah, he and I are friends. He is living in Colorado, not doing anything in computers other than using what his knowledge and what he does for scouting.
When you guys were working on the first software for the computer, did you write that in assembly or BASIC? Can you talk a little bit about the bootstrapping process and how you guys got the first software programs working on that machine?
How we got up the first time, how we bootstrapped the entire project up?
Yes, so you talked about developing software for the machine, and you talked about having Bill Gates work on BASIC
okay.
for the machine. So what did you do before BASIC arrived? Were you writing
All
purely in
assembly.
assembly?
All assembly and PLM. Anybody know what that is? Okay, PLM was programming, the programming language Micro, I think it was. It was something Gary Kildall actually wrote at the Naval Postgraduate School. It was a higher level language. It would generate assembly. I had a copy of it. And we used that and pure assembly on my Altair to write it in assembly to get it bootstrapped up.
We're about out of time. I just want to thank Don for coming out and spending time with us today here at VCF. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. I enjoyed it. Thank you.